some of the issues. As we discussed since yesterday, that celiac disease is about gluten-free diet. And the question is, how do we make our country sufficient that our patients get gluten-free diet? And we all know gluten-free diet is a complex issue. For the physician, it's very easy to write. You make a diagnosis, you think about celiac disease, make a diagnosis, and write gluten-free diet. That's very easy for us to do. But for patients, is extremely difficult. That the gluten-free diet is very complex. It's not about pills, we discussed today. It's about day-to-day living. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, travel, school, marriage, so many things are there. And therefore, in a society, if we want to treat celiac disease, we have to have an infrastructure. We have to have things in place. And what, if you think of writing a prescription of gluten-free diet, means what? We say you take gluten-free diet. Question comes, is it available? Can I afford it? Is it quality good? We just saw if quality is not good, there is a contamination, disease will remain active. Therefore, the number of issues where society has to prepare itself. Society, I mean patients, healthcare professionals, regulations, all have to come in place for treating patients as well. With that, and also we take this opportunity to discuss certain new things which can emerge, innovation in celiac disease arena. To start with the first question, we discussed yesterday that the first was dietitian availability, and we don't in our country or in Asia Pacific, which is the focus for this meeting, that we don't have many trained dietitians. There are only few, handful. And therefore, we as a healthcare professional in our own hospital, we have to make an effort that we train at least one dietitian in celiac care. And that will be, I think, one of the big support we can provide to patients with celiac disease. Second comes patient support group, and I'd like to start from there itself. We had heard yesterday Nikhil Vij, and this person being a patient and subsequently became a leader himself and guiding so many patients with celiac disease. So therefore we need to create that resource of a patient support group, and we have Dr. Ishi Khosla and also Dr. Sushma Narayan. They have been working quite hard in this area, and we applaud their support to treat these patients. So let me start with both of you first, that what was the inspiration that you created celiac support organization? Yes.
Thank you, sir. I'm very grateful that we have been given a chance to speak here in this August meeting. And all of you in your bag will have this book. This is a small booklet which we have created as a support booklet for patients and parents. Now, there's a small story in 2008. When I had started working early in 2000 for celiac disease patients, and we lost a patient to celiac crisis. Very, very poor child. She was roaming around in the corridors of the hospital. Her name was Nisha. And we tried our level best. We could not save that child. And I had a near breakdown when I went home, and then next day we had a meeting with our colleagues, and we tried to think that how are we going to provide support for these children? These are Indian children. You see, celiac disease is very country specific, very cultural specific, very economic specific. We cannot apply the same American rules, UK rules, and Japan or Malaysian rules to India. India has completely different ethnicity. But then again, from north to south, there is so much variation. From east to west, there is so much variation. So we decided to create Celiac Support Organization. The main mandate of this organization was first to create an awareness. Why did Nisha die? Because none of the doctors knew anything about celiac disease. None of them knew how to manage this. And when the child was being even rehabilitation, they were giving weight. And we had to stop it. So what we thought that the best thing for us to do was to create an organization which will be truly service-based organization. A group of gastroenterologists, dietitians, nutritionists, some philanthropists got together to create this organization, which is primarily based out of Delhi, but we are trying to reach out as much as possible in northern states of India, because the celiac disease is primarily seen there, but also being now seen down south. So, and this organization is now trying to reach out to these poor patients to give them affordable diets, to teach them affordable meals, how to manage, because India is eminently suited to be gluten-free. Our diets are eminently suited to be non-commercial, make at home, eat at home. Eat home food is what we profess. We tell them not to buy, we tell them how to make gluten-free kitchens, we tell them how to create easy, affordable recipes and how to create flours. And that is our main mandate, that we can become gluten-free without having packaged food. And that is really working out well. The other thing which we are doing, we are going from college to college, nutrition college, we are conducting awareness lectures for doctors and nutritionists.
Thank you, Dr. Stefan. I think it's so remarkable that you started this organization and we are going to save a lot many patients like Lisa. And Lisa would be an example that how we make difference to our patients. Just thinking about them, because we as a physician, patient at center, I think our life revolves around that. And that would be so important for each one of us to imbibe and learn from you. Thank you so very much. Dr. Khosla, want to add?
Well, for me it is a personal journey, so I can share the story if you allow me a little time.
I think, the celiac is very sensitive and very emotional.
Yeah.
But it's young children, patients, and diet it costs. It's not about money, it's about counseling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in my case, the reason to start the Celiac Society of India was happened in my family with my son, who presented with really no symptom as such, and he grew up to 2.5 years very well, chubby, and then when I did the blood work as routine blood work was done, I always found his hemoglobin to be 11 and 10.5, 11, and that used to just kind of worry me that why doesn't it go up beyond that, and if I supplemented with iron it would go up. So that was, the pediatrician was somebody who's really renowned and his family for us, and these discussions with him yielded no, he had no interest. He said it's fine, let it be, and he began to be a picky eater. He started probably becoming not interested in food, which was something which also started bothering me. Again, this was not a symptom, there was nothing to really go and seek advice for, but as a mother I was not comfortable. When it struck me that maybe iron could be malabsorption, could be the reason, I discussed that with the pediatrician and he dismissed it and said, there's nothing like that. Your son is tall, he was always higher than the average Indian height, and he wasn't losing weight, there was nothing else, no GI symptoms. But when he was growing, I wasn't happy with the way he was compared to my younger son, there was nothing like that. And so I continued to persist this in my head, it was there, and wanted to document it. And then after a lot of argument with my pediatrician uncle, he wrote those tests for me. Those were, in those days, anti-gliadin and anti-glutenin antibodies. And we found them positive. But he dismissed those and said these are non-specific, 45% specific tests, so your son doesn't have celiac disease. So I thought, well, okay, good news that he doesn't have celiac, but what is it that keeps the hemoglobin 10, 11? And we kind of, then it was Sarat, Dr. Gopalan sitting right across me, who suggested after 4 years that we have TTG, which has just come up, and it's always in your mind, why don't you get that done? And then he was about 11 years of age, we got those done, and they were positive. And finally,
what turned you towards celiac disease?
So when we documented this, I said, if my son has celiac disease, with no symptoms. There will be in India so many people suffering from anemia. The major public health problems in India are anemia and malnutrition and diarrhea. So I said, this is exactly what is going on in the country, and we need to spread awareness about malabsorption, and that's how this thing started. And we have been, I think, from 2006 to now. I was just telling you that celiac disease is not a foreign word anymore. Gluten is understood. The food industry has responded. So we're in a much better place. But it really started with the fact that if I can, in this profession, with knowing so many doctors and my colleagues suffer for that long, that is, and they could be just silent celiacs or people with misdiagnosed problems. So
what we heard from both Dr. Narayan and Dr. Khosla, that personal inspiration. Nisa was inspiration for Narayan and her own son, inspiration for her to create those resources for not only for the whole family, but the rest of the patients with celiac disease. And it happens that in the US, you have a Celiac Disease Foundation, and we know that so many people are inspired themselves, having family, somebody having celiac disease, and they are one of the greatest scientists in celiac disease. We know personally, a few of the top gastroenterologists which are innovative in celiac disease have a personal inspiration from their family having celiac disease. With that, again, we have to learn from, as in Asia, we have to learn that as in celiac disease grows in Asia, we have to create those resources for patient support. And I'm requesting all Asian Pacific leaders here that we need to create those resources. Even there are 5 patients in my country, I have to take with these 5 patients. And giving gluten-free diet, say for example, in Singapore, it won't be easy. Am I right? It won't be easy to have a gluten-free diet because this involves a lot of people. You can't import food for every time. You have to have indigenous food production and those who are which are reliable. So when the second question comes, that once we talk of is the food regulations are important, and every food, to say level food is so important. Unless food is level, how does the patient know this food is safe for me? India has an opportunity because most of us will cook at home, and therefore we are much at ease because you buy gluten-free, natural gluten-free grains, grind it, and make it home. But those people who live alone, those people who live on somebody else's for their meals, or those who have a restaurant, then there has to be some regulation. And that's important. And how does I know as a patient that which food do I buy? And just to tell everyone that whatever we buy in our packaged food, it will have gluten. Unless it is level, no. Because the gluten industry is a great industry. The gluten is a great protein. And it's so important for each one of us. But except for celiac patients, they can't tolerate it. But for majority of people, gluten is a fantastic protein. And therefore, for that 1% population, we need to have a regulation. And recently, about a couple of years back, with a lot of efforts of Dr. Khosla and Dr. Narayan, the food regulation of India has given notification that food will level. But it has not yet come to practice. Still we get food in our country which are sold in the market at street food level. And you know that there are millions of factories of food in this country or in Asia Pacific region. So to rethink out that, it's to get time. Therefore we need to increase awareness. We need to go together and keep asking those food regulators that enforce these rules very vividly. So maybe ask Sari that you heard that food regulation is so important, and but it's not happening in the industry. And they always say that there are billions of lakhs of industry. How can we do that? And if you do that, that's the challenge they say always. What are your opinions?
First, I must clarify I'm a hepatologist and although trained as gastroenterologist. And I came here to salute your crusade, Dr. Makaria, and this very august gathering. And also that a challenge that I face, that the number of NAFLD or MAFLD has increased tremendously in last maybe 2 decades. And I also feel this is because, to a large extent, maybe something related to food. It could be the gluten or so. And most of our liver patients now are being shifted to a GFD for no reason, for no science, but an assumption. And I therefore need you and your society. Coming to regulatory part, it is very challenging. I would say the awareness level of people and society about celiac is still minimal. You have a very good gathering. They know the term, but they don't know what is GFD. They know celiac disease, but gluten-free diet awareness is very poor. And I think this guide I just saw is very good. I have the following suggestions for steps. I think we should have a survey where you can say what is the awareness level and what is the gap. If you see the gap in the uneducated and educated is say, which I feel, we should see what are the milestones. 2, what are the correct ways, and I am involved into another food regulatory part. I know the prints are not readable, so a school kid does not know that this is not for me. So it should be readable, it should be clearly mentioned, and as rightly said, should go to all levels. The next step is a 1-year process, and to see how in the next meeting or 2025 regulations are framed and proposed. So today the gap, the targets, and what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it's quite important that chart out important points and then follow each point regularly on that. So let's bring to somebody has a question. I've asked this question to Dr. Mandal. Mandal is a medical scientist and he's leading a big program in ICAR. ICAR is the Indian Council of Medical Research, and he's doing a big program on low gluten food. Low gluten food mainly for non-celiacs, but in non-celiac and also in celiac, ATI is important. Amylose inhibitor is also an important component. So, can you highlight what is the ATI and how important is that?
Thank you so much, Dr. Makharia. Basically, I also knew about celiac disease, the name, after coming to Delhi. Since I am in ICR for quite some time, almost around 30 years, but then when I came to Indian Agriculture Research Institute, which is Pusa Institute where I am working now, I got introduced with the problem, and then we are working as a team for almost 8 years. Initially, the program was, Dr. Anju yesterday gave a talk, what is gluten. Initially, the program was that we should actually look into the gluten. Gluten is having numerous peptides, polypeptides. It's like around 100, 150, nobody knows exactly how many numbers. But then, day by day, we are knowing the number of immunogenic peptides. It's piece of around 10, 12 amino acids. So now Anju tried to remove the gliding part, but then around 6 years back, Dr. Makharia himself has introduced the term ATI, amylase trypsin inhibitor, and Dr. Chuppan is actually working among the immunologists on this. Now we looked into that. Basically, what I was told and what I came to know is that it is not the gluten per se, but then amylase trypsin inhibitor also triggers the celiac disease. That ultimately what he was talking about, the T cell. So the medicos as well as immunologists will be knowing better, but as an agriculture scientist, what I was supposed to do, see what are the different types of amylase trypsin inhibitor is there, and then I tried to knock them out. So we potent around 10 amylase trypsin inhibitor. They are very, very interesting kind of things because they are small molecules, but then they don't work alone. There are some amylase trypsin inhibitor which has to be either dimeric or tetrameric to form. So we took those 10 amylase trypsin inhibitor, and recently around a year back, my PhD student, we could knock out around 8, and the amylase and trypsin inhibitor assay wise it got reduced. Now there are 2 points I just wanted to. Yeah, I just wanted to make 2 points. Both the cases, like Dr. Anju has made gliadin deleted wheat lines, as well as we made some knocked out free of amylase trypsin inhibitor. Now this has to be tested by immunologist whether they are actually eliciting T cell or not. And sir, what you told is yes, it is spread over different chromosomes, because wheat is having 21 chromosomes. But it's not impossible, because in agriculture, if my request is you please involve in such kind of thing. This is a great opportunity for both of us, me and Anju, to come here and present that the problem is with agriculture. So if you involve more agriculture scientists into that, I am sure that one day wheat will come with not gluten free, but then the immunogenic peptide. That's all, sir.
Okay. I think this is also the point with the middle bit, that it's a great opportunity for scientists of different arenas to join hands together. And here, Celiac is one example where agriculture scientists and clinical scientists, fundamental scientists can have a big role to play. And with that, I come back to Dan Leffler. Dan Leffler is you heard him, top Celiac enthusiast globally, and also Dr. Peter Dean. So, also in the US, we say that food labeling regulations are so important for each country. How do you achieve that in the US?
So, I don't know, Peter, I'll be interested in hearing your opinions on this. I feel like we have made progress in the US, but there's still a lot of issues. We know that commonly things, even labeled as gluten-free, have gluten contamination. There was a great study that Peter's group did where they had patients test food that was gluten-free from restaurants, and almost 30% had some gluten exposure. So it is a big problem everywhere. That being said, I do think one of the things, I think we have strong patient organizations that actually run the food testing, and I think this is the same in Europe, where it's part of the patient organization business model to go and certify and set up certifications. I think there's pluses and minuses to that, but I think it's not something that you can necessarily, unfortunately, rely on government to do. The government might be able to set a threshold, but it's up to the consumers, it's up to the celiac groups, the community, to really figure out how to test that and confirm that. But it's very challenging. I don't know any place that does it perfectly. I don't know. Peter, do you have any thoughts on how to get a safe gluten-free food supply?
I think it's having to work with the regulatory people. We're all very busy and we have our areas of interest. I'm very interested, Govind, in what your relationship, you seem to be able to establish relationships, so readily as manifested by this meeting. Like, what is your relationship with the different regulatory bodies, and how many different regulatory bodies would you need to interact with to get this disease out of the academic centres and the doctor's office into being more prominent and supported by the government?
I think what you can realize that everybody talks about the gluten leveling, but it's beyond that. It's much beyond that. Gluten leveling is about packaged food, but you go to a restaurant, and how do you know what you're eating is gluten-free? So by the way, today's tea break and lunch is gluten-free for today. So how do you, once you go to a restaurant, I mean, unless the restaurant is aware about it, that there are some people who ask for gluten-free food, how to provide that. So there's also a great challenge for those people who travel, and therefore we have to go to that level someday, that we have to have a restaurant leveling gluten-free food. And it's not easy, I mean, but someday we have to reach there. Because we discussed yesterday that we have about 60 million people with celiac disease globally, and India itself 4 to 6 million people, 40 to 60 lakh people have celiac. Means they will be small town, they will be big towns, they will be metro cities, but they will require food for themselves every day. So coming to
may I just add one more point on the regulation? One is the definition of a gluten-free diet. Like I spoke about the cross-reactive grains, they in my practice are very, very like 100% accurate. Introduction of these and withdrawal of these can make a big difference. So I think we need to dwell more on this issue of cross-reactive grains as well as some additives which are used very commonly in the food industry. There's something called microbial transglutaminase, MTTG, which has been studied extensively by Dr. Aaron Lerner, and so this also has the same effect of the intestinal permeability and the damage to the mucosa. So this is used extensively in meat industry as well as other. These things need to be added in our regulation. Just going gluten-free per se may not be the only thing. And of course, the other thing is in India, organic is being used for millets, organic millets. But the flour contamination, the flour meal contamination is a very big issue. So that is not being addressed. So these things need to be there in the guidelines.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now we come back to one other important observation. We did a survey of global select experts. We sent a survey to 300 people who are select experts, and 130 of them responded to that survey. The survey, the question had that what is gluten-free food in your country, in terms of quality, in terms of cost, in terms of availability. If somebody wants to highlight some of, can you highlight from here, sir?
Sorry, sir, I missed the question.
So the question was that we had a survey we did together. Yes. There's over 360 people in the world. 130 had 130 responded. Yes. And we asked about quality, we asked about availability, we asked about cost. So what the response survey?
So thank you, sir. I think the major part that we gleaned from the survey was that the level of preparedness that we have in different levels of income countries is entirely different. So when we talk of a high income country, we think that a lot of regulatory issues are taken care of, but that's actually not the case. And a lot of people still feel that the labeling that they do get over there is probably not as good as they would want it to be. And there is still a lot of work to be desired. As we move on from the higher income countries to middle income countries and lower income countries, the availability, the cost and the labeling of gluten-free foods becomes even more of an issue. But the issues are there at all places, and I think the regulatory framework needs to be definitely strengthened to make this issue more manageable for patients as well as the dietitians and the doctors. And obviously this cannot be managed at the level of healthcare providers alone. And this requires coordination with policymakers, this requires coordination with a lot of stakeholders who are in the food industry. As we have agricultural scientists, we can probably have people who are involved in more regulation. And perhaps that will help us ensure that these rules are actually implemented. Because the guidelines are already there. We have that guideline of 20 parts per million of gluten. We have that guideline of actually what food should be labeled. But the implementation is lacking, and that needs a lot of work.
Perfect. So, I mean, that's so important that the making regulation is not easy, that's also difficult, but implementation is the further more difficult. So, also comes to the question of cost. That certain countries like Canada or a certain other European countries provide support to these patients in terms of free food or in terms of some cash money. And
Kervin, when you finished, I want to add something else.
So cost, food to bear cost, and many societies, many governments have do support to their patients directly, which is not still true in our country, or is not going to happen very soon. But that's also important. That how can they provide support to patients with celiac in terms of resources, giving them free food or giving some money to support their free food. which is there in many countries. So Peter Green wants to say.
Yes. The story in the United States was interesting. A lot of us were very active in getting wheat in a food labelling bill that was basically about allergens because they had a very big lobby. The food allergy people had a very great lobby to the government, and they introduced a bill. So we were able to make sure that wheat got on the food labelling bill. But gluten was not included, and so gluten in the food label is entirely voluntary, and there's no policing of it at all. And that compares with like Canada, in which the government will allow gluten labelling, but they will also check to make sure that gluten-free food is gluten-free.
If anyone has questions, it's point of time. Before we go to a couple of more questions. Yes. Anybody else? Any other question?
See, we have experience nearly for last 3 decades about celiac disease in children. In our experience, what we found that we have an advantage. Indian ladies are highly dedicated to the children, and they will go to any extent. They will go to make good recipes for them and make good dishes for them. In addition, there are certain ladies who really create gluten-free recipes which are akin to any birthday party. They make cakes, they make so many things, and there are ladies who do it. So I think regulation is a long-drawn process. We have to make attempts in India, but at the same time, I think dietitians can play a big role in creating certain recipes which are gluten-free recipes, and they can be given to different kinds of population for implementation at the church. But we have a problem. As they go to the hotels, hostels, they go for outing. Now they have become adolescents and bigger ones, and there's a problem in that. So I think there's a need for creating, dietitians will create recipes for our children which are gluten-free, that can be ensured and made at home.
Dr. Lee, what do we, Dr. Justin, what do we come to?
I totally agree with whatever has been said earlier, and our mothers, dietitians, everybody is really good. Any gluten family you go into, the mothers are really expert in bringing out the recipes. But as Dr. Yata said, problem happens when they step out of the house, when they're in college, they're adolescents, and they go to hostels. So what, as I understand is, as a society and as gastroenterologists, what we have to push is, food labeling is meaningless unless we enforce food testing. So subsidized food testing is the need of the hour, because we are a huge population. Our 1% celiac population translates into massive numbers. And if we have to make a dent, and if we have to improve the health of the population, what we have to push for is a standardized, subsidized food testing with all the gluten-free food manufacturers, because at some point of time it is inevitable for these kids to go out and have to take something which is not being cooked in their own kitchens.
I would like to ask Dr. Dan and Dr. Peter Green, sir. So what I have seen in my practice is that the gluten-free food products that are available in India mostly self-proclaimed. They write on their packaging that it is gluten-free. So and then people question us, is it really gluten-free? In our own study, we found that those self-proclaimed gluten-free products were having some contamination. So do you have a regulatory authority in your countries which provides the labeling for gluten-free before the product can be labeled as gluten-free? And how do you handle these situations when patients ask you if it is actually gluten-free?
There's no regulatory body. Dan can correct me if correct. There's no regulatory body. Labeling of food gluten-free is purely voluntary. and there's no check that the food is actually gluten-free. Like our dietitian will call these companies and they will ask, do they actually check the food to quantitate any gluten in it? And so, but that's just an individual dietitian quirk. So there's actually no regulatory body that deals with gluten per se. That's correct, right, Dan?
Yeah, no, that's correct, and it's a big problem. It's really a dietitian-led and it's patient support group. There's an interesting reference that you can look up. You might be able to do something similar. There's a site called Gluten Free Watchdog, Peter knows well, that's run by a dietitian, and she does her own independent testing of different products and puts them online, and then you can look and be like, all right, Tricia Thompson, the dietitian, said this one was good. Everyone can believe it because she does her own testing. So maybe that's something to do here, is just have a dietitian who's funded to do that kind of work and make it public.
There's another website that we put patients onto. It's glutenfreedrugs.com. And it's just run by a pharmacist, I think, in Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and we'll keep up to date documenting whether medicines are gluten-free or not, because that's certainly an area that creates great anxiety with the patient. But once again, there's no regulation about the filler in pills. There is a movement to try to get the regulators to say that you can't have wheat starch as the filler in pills. It should be something like cornstarch, but it's very slow to get something through because there's a lot of competition from different lobbies. Like the food labelling bill that I mentioned before, it was very hard to get through because the food industry kept blocking it as much as it could.
So I think since we don't have a next session, we got extra time to discuss a lot of important issues, and we believe that the celiac disease are very, very important for each country. And we have 4 minutes left. Maybe ask Pokan and Dr. Hokari what are your views, because now we don't see many celiac patients. And this was question I want to ask Justine from Malaysia and also from Dr. Lee, that this is going to emerge, and celiac disease in our countries like Singapore, Japan, different, but in Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, celiac is going to emerge. So these questions will be very important. That you have to go back to your authorities and ask for these regulations. We need to start preparing from now, because our studies show that there will be patients with celiac disease in these countries. Do you have any view on that? And how do we do it? In Singapore or in Malaysia?
I don't even know where to begin with regards to ensuring compliance with regulations for food labeling, because I think at least in Singapore, there is a very low level of awareness of even celiac disease or gluten being an issue. A lot of the people's perception of it is all this celebrity hype facts with regards to gluten-free diets. But I am always critical of our health promotion agencies because they seem to have a very simplistic way of putting out messages. So what has happened, I've noticed, is that the peoples from Philippines, Thailand, China, South India, Indonesia who moved to Singapore, they have evolved from their original breakfast of eating rice at home. And in Singapore, it's a fast-paced society, so the easiest is a couple of slices of bread, and then they're off to the office. So I think that is driving about that. But the other thing that I am critical of our health promotion agency is that they have this being important. Everything is about high fiber. So the bread industry has hijacked that and came up with, oh, bread is high fiber. Even though it's white bread, it's still high fiber. And they've had this big move against rice. So that now people have moved from rice to bread. And the health promotion agency just hasn't even started understanding all these nuances and niceties. It's just very, very blunt signals that they're giving out.
So circumstance of gluten-free diet in Japan is extremely critical, bad. So now the prevalence of celiac disease is all over the world increasing, and travelers or students from abroad comes to Japan, but in the restaurant or in the supermarket you cannot find any gluten-free diet sign. I also cannot understand which contains gluten, and the extremely low prevalence of celiac disease in Japan doesn't mean they don't eat gluten. Our traditional food like udon or soy sauce contains gluten, so that should be corrected in future. Yeah, so maybe travelers of celiac disease comes to Japan, maybe they will be surprised, and yeah, that's a problem.
Thank you, Dr. Kali. And I have last minute. And this celiac
I'm sure whether we should just a very brief one on what we have. The thing is like there's definitely a very poor awareness in Malaysia itself, and I believe as a society, as the community member, we should create resources that encourage our own colleagues to really make a diagnosis. But in terms of regulatory, I think it's very difficult unless there is a real economic reason for that. And one of the usual driver would be if there is a celebrity or even a politician that happens to have celiac disease, then that is possibly will drive more awareness. So this could be something that we can work on, and I do agree that some form of support group. I do think we can learn from your colleague on having some form of support group and resources that we can learn from everyone here. I think that's my take from Malaysia. Thanks.
I think it's very fantastic that, as he said, that we have the support for different community, and we can play a lot of role advising them how to create support. I have last minute, and I say this opportunity for collaboration in terms of social scientists, clinical scientists, fundamental scientists, agriculture scientists, and also technologists. And as I said, T-cell is not only about therapy in celiac disease, but T-cell, plasma T-cell will be a diagnostic opportunity, which talk more about this. I'll do very much today. And we have to say, for last question to you, that what do you think that the T-cell diagnostics in celiac disease is really an opportunity?
Certainly, thanks Dr. Govind for the opportunity. So I represent a biotech company called Immunitas Bio. So we believe that T-cell provides the next generation diagnostic tools, and we have done this for COVID when we were all testing antibodies for COVID. We did this for COVID, the T-cell immunity test, and we commercialized it and sold it. So when we looked at the celiac disease, we saw the same opportunity exist there, because probably yesterday Dr. Anderson spoke about it, and today Dr. Govind spoke about the importance of T cells. And all the dendritic stress that we currently have is all secondary to the T cells. The first line of action that happens in the T cells. If we can develop a test that can detect these T cells, then that we believe is a better tool for diagnosing T cells, the celiac disease. So we have, I think, if you ask an entrepreneur that is developing a cost, it will be difficult for him to answer that. Okay, so but we will make it affordable. That's the key. So the point that we want to say is it will be a simple blood test, like any diagnostic labs how it is currently done. All you need is few ml of blood. You put it into a tube. It will give you some biomarkers which can be measured and reported, and we can work on the sensitivity and so on. So that is something which we are currently developing, and not only for celiac disease, we see the potential of this in many other diseases, and what we want to achieve in the long run is, like we have a kidney function test, liver function test, can we have an immune function test? That's the goal that we have as a company. That's where we are heading towards. So that's a sort of tool that we are developing, and we will be working with Dr. Govind on the celiac disease part, and we hope that maybe in a year's time we will be having some answers to this. And our efforts are very similar to what Dr. Anderson is also trying to achieve with a different biomarker. something very similar. Just a last point I just want to add about the gluten-free diet. Being a business guy, I looked at the market size for the gluten-free diet. Globally, the market size is 6.5 billion. And do you know what is the Indian market size? It's just 3% of that, which is around 20 million. So that we are nowhere on the gluten-free diet. And I see that's a huge opportunity for Indian entrepreneurs to think. While I do agree that, advice groups are all great, but unless an industry evolves, the problem cannot be solved.
So I want to end this panel with a very positive note that for IBD, type 1 diabetes, and all other etiology, pharma industry makes drugs for you, and we prescribe drugs. For celiac disease, there's no pharma industry at this point in time. It's all we have to do, our own efforts for our patients to create these opportunities and regulations. With that, I'd like to thank chairpersons. I'd like to thank all panelists for your wonderful discussion. And Dr. Lee, I'm sorry about that, but thanks so very much.
Thank you, Dr. Makharia. I think I learned a lot from this session, and I hope that was a very good learning experience for all of the listeners. We'll wrap up here now. I'd like to thank Dr. Makharia and all the panelists for joining us today. Can we join for a photograph?
So thank you everybody for your